Working at the Harvard negotiation project with thousands of people on all kinds of difficult conversations, the authors Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen have found a way to make these conversations less stressful and more productive. Difficult Conversations provides a step-by-step approach to having tough conversations with less stress and more success. The book teaches how to decipher the underlying structure of every difficult conversation. Start a conversation without defensiveness. Listen for the meaning of what is not said. Stay balanced in the face of attacks and accusations. Move from emotion to productive problem solving. Difficult conversations involve anything we find difficult to talk. We usually fear consequences, whether we bring up the issue or avoid it. If we avoid the subject, we risk our feelings festering or the situation worsening. If we bring up the issue, we risk upsetting the other person or not getting what we want. The approach. Difficult conversations are difficult first and foremost because of how we approach them. Most of us approach difficult conversations as though we are right and the other person is wrong. As though our feelings are the most important. And as though we have to either win the conversation or risk losing it. To have better difficult conversations, we must change how we think of difficult conversations and how we approach them. The authors studied thousands of difficult conversations and discovered that they all shared the same basic structure comprised of 3 conversations going on within the difficult conversation. 1. The what happened conversation. 2. The feelings conversation. 3. The identity conversation. The what happened conversation.
The single most important thing you can do is to shift your internal stance from "I understand" to "help me understand." Everything else follows from that.
The what happened conversation is about who's right and who's wrong. In these conversations, we usually confuse intention with impact, and believe that because we're upset about something, that the other person intended to hurt us. We blame the other person for the issue and view ourselves as victims. We essentially turn what could be a productive difficult conversation into an argument about who was right and who deserves to be punished. The antidote to this harmful version of the what happened conversation is to embrace something called the contribution system. No one person is to blame in any difficult conversation. Difficult conversations arise when 2 people have contributed to the situation to make it difficult. There are some exceptions to this rule, but conflict generally arises when 2 people's choices and beliefs clash, meaning both people have contributed something to the conflict. The contribution system helps us focus on how we might have contributed to the issue, so that we can take some ownership of the situation, and make better choices in the future. It also helps us express how we think the other person has contributed productively. The other person has less room to get defensive, if they feel we've taken responsibility for our own actions as well. The feelings conversation.
Difficult conversations do not just involve feelings, they are at their very core about feelings.
Feelings conversation gets suppressed and goes unmentioned, or becomes one-sided and ultimately turns into blame. Most of us go into difficult conversations either oblivious to our own feelings about the issue, convinced we shouldn't bring our feelings into the conversation, or convinced that our feelings are the only ones that matter. The first antidote is getting to know our emotional footprint. What emotions we feel comfortable acknowledging, and what emotions we don't, usually based on how our family handled emotions. Once we're more aware of what emotions we easily identify, versus what we hide from ourselves, we can start to be more aware of what triggers these emotions, and how we can better manage them. All emotions are valid and acceptable. However, we can learn to act on our emotions in healthier ways. We need to learn to delve deeper into our feelings and practice identifying and analyzing all the emotions that pop up for us in difficult situations. Once we do that, we can begin to negotiate, on our own, why these feelings are popping up, what past experiences and current triggers are bringing them up, and whether the stories we're telling ourselves about the current situation are fair or based in reality. The identity conversation.
In truth, we are all fast and slow, strong and weak, motivated and lazy in 1,000 tiny ways, throughout our days that the generalizations simply don't capture.
In the identity conversation, we view our identity as all or nothing. For example, if we hurt someone, we're a terrible person. Or conversely, we're a good person, and the other person's complaints about us aren't valid. In general, identity issues center on three unspoken questions. 1. Am I competent? 2. Am I a good person? 3. Am I worthy of love? In difficult conversations, we're all worried that the answer to each question is no. The antidote to this harmful version of the identity conversation is to develop a more grounded identity. Humans are complex, no human is all good or all bad. We all make mistakes, we all have complex intentions, and we're all still worthy of love. The instance allows us to complicate our identity and acknowledge our complexity by embracing the contradictions. You're a good person, and you hurt someone's feelings. You're competent, and you made a mistake this time. You're worthy of love, and there are things you can work on to be a better person. You're a good boss, and you have to fire a long time. You're a good husband, and you haven't been paying attention to your wife's feelings lately. Adopting the instance helps us break out of all or nothing identities and ground our identity in reality instead of absolutes. Guidelines for a good difficult conversation. Once you're aware of the meta-conversations and better ways to approach those conversations, you can start navigating the difficult conversation as a whole. The book provides some basic tips and reframings to help you have the best difficult conversation possible. Replace certainty with curiosity. Instead of going into the conversation certain that you're right, certain that the other person had bad intentions, or certain that the conversation will go well, focus on being curious about the situation. What is the other person's side of the story? How do they interpret the events that occurred? How do they view your contributions? What, in their minds, would improve the situation? The more curious you can be about their perspective, the less accusatory you'll be about what's happened, and the more room they'll have to participate with you and help you find a workable solution. Separate intention from impact. Other people's actions make us feel certain ways depending on our past experiences and personal emotional baggage. When we get hurt or upset, our first impulse is usually to assume the other person meant for us to feel this way. This is rarely the case. Just because someone hurt your feelings, impact, doesn't mean that's what they were trying to do, intention. We're always quick to assume that other people have bad intentions, though we give ourselves a lot of leeways when we hurt someone because we know that wasn't our intention. Assuming someone meant to hurt you will color how you view them and affect the course of the difficult conversation. Most of us presume bad intentions equals bad people, and we're far less likely to be curious about, understanding of, or accepting of the other person's perspective if we view them as a bad person rather than a good person who's made mistakes. Be a good listener. Listening is an incredibly important skill in a difficult conversation. The author's most common complaint about difficult conversations is that the other person isn't listening. This really means we need to get better at listening if we expect others to listen to us truly. Humans long to be heard and understood. Have you noticed how often people repeat themselves or double down on an argument in a difficult conversation? This is a sure sign that they don't feel heard, and don't feel like the other person is trying to empathize with their perspective. Making sure your conversation partner feels heard, understood, and accepted, first will make it easier for that person to hear your point of view. If we're having trouble listening to someone, it usually means we're wrapped up in our inner voice. Our inner voice, or inner dialogue, runs all the time. But during a difficult conversation, our inner voice usually yells about the three meta-conversations. Once you understand those three conversations and have worked through your own contributions, feelings, and identity, your inner voice will quiet down, and you can be a better listener. 3 things you can do to be a good listener. 1. Ask questions to learn instead of trying to prove a point. 2. Paraphrase their responses to show that you're listening and trying to understand them. 3. Acknowledge their feelings, which might require you to listen to what's going unsaid in the conversation. Summing it up. In business, day-to-day interactions, and personal matters, difficult conversations come up all the time. Conversations where people's thoughts, feelings, and perceptions about certain issues are in conflict. But if we can learn how to handle difficult conversations more productively, our relationships and lives will improve.